Hey, in this tutorial we're going to take a look at using the system browser in our Ionic 2 Android and iOS application. So what I mean by system browser is I mean web browser. So we're going to see how to launch URLs to be used in either our whatever browser is installed on our mobile device or using Apache Cordova's in-app browser. All of this is actually done with the InAppBrowser plugin, and I actually demonstrated how to do this in an Ionic Framework 1 application. But since Ionic Framework 1 is becoming out of date and we're now moving on to Ionic Framework 2, I thought it would be a good idea to do a refresh tutorial that shows how to launch these external URLs using Ionic Framework version 2. So with that said, let's go ahead and create a new project on our desktop. So we're going to say Ionic start example project blank v2. So it's important to note that you have to be using the Ionic CLI that supports Ionic 2 applications. So that's where the v2 tag comes in. If you're not using a compatible version of the CLI, I recommend you go to the Ionic Framework website and follow the instructions to obtain that particular CLI. Go ahead and hit enter. All right, with the project created on our desktop, let's go ahead and navigate into it. And we're going to add two platforms to this project. So we're going to say Ionic platform add Android. And then, if you're using a Mac, and you have to be using a Mac computer to run this, you can say Ionic platform add iOS, because this is a feature of Mac only. You cannot build iOS applications on a Windows or Linux computer. So clear that. So we will be making use of the InAppBrowser plugin, the same plugin that we used in our last tutorial. So let's go ahead and add that. So we're going to say Cordova Plug-In add Cordova Plug-In in-app browser. Perfect. So we now have our project. It has everything we need to start coding, and it should be on your desktop if you followed my instructions. So we're going to open that. Everything we want is inside of the www folder, and we're going to just open up whatever's in that folder using, say, Atom, but we won't be playing around with index.html. What we're going to be doing is we're going to spend all of our time in the home.js file and the home.html file. But before we start creating UI, let's hang out inside of the home.js file. We're going to add some logic. And it's not going to be a lot of logic. It's not going to be anything complicated. But we are going to say first, we're going to include platform. And then inside of our constructor, we're going to say platform:platform. And we're going to say this.platform equals platform. So if you're unfamiliar with what platform is, so if you're coming from, say, Ionic Framework 1, you might be familiar with the Ionic Platform Ready. If you're not coming from Ionic Framework 1 and you're just coming from Apache Cordova, this is the same as saying on device ready. Because the in-app browser is a native plugin, we need to make sure that our application is ready before we try to use our plugins. And that's what this little wrapper function does, is it'll wait until it's ready before it tries to use them, and it'll prevent errors and a lot of stress. So let's go ahead and now create a function for launching URLs. Let's call it something simple like launch, and we're going to pass in a URL. And inside of this function, we're going to say this.platform.ready.then, and inside of this, we're now going to be able to add what we want to do with that plugin. So we're going to say Cordova.inappbrowser.open, and then whatever URL is passed in, we're going to assume that it is a correctly formed URL because this is a simple tutorial. We're not going to get too thoughtful in it. The specific browser that we want to launch is going to be the system browser. But if you go to the official documentation, there are other tags that you can throw in here for different browser types. And then these are the options. We're just going to say, for example, location equals yes or true. And we're going to hit save. So our logic is done. There wasn't anything special in this logic file. Now we can go to the home HTML file and to continue on our simplicity here, we're going to erase this content and we're going to say button click. So for the click event, we're going to say launch. We're going to pass in a URL. Let's just call it my blog. And then we're going to say launch URL. Perfect. So everything is done at this point. We did our small logic bit. We added a button to launch the URL. Now we want to try it. So go back to your terminal. We're going to say Ionic build Android. You do iOS too, it doesn't matter. There is something that I forgot to do before I built. So as of right now, in Ionic Framework 2, there is a bug where this bug, when you try to build an application, it won't compile the CSS and font files. I've reported this issue. It's been acknowledged, and it will be fixed in a future version. So if this hasn't been fixed yet, if you're viewing this video and it has not been fixed, you can get past it by first installing Gulp from npm and say Gulp Sass. So it just compiled the Sass files, and by saying Gulp fonts. Now again, just to reiterate here, in a more modern release, if you're watching this video at a later time than when I published it, chances are it's been fixed. But if it hasn't, note that this is the easy fix to make that work. So go ahead and clear, or we're going to build it again. It won't take as long the second time. Perfect. It's built. Now we can install it. So we're going to say adb install r platforms android build outputs apk android debug.apk. And if I open my simulator again, it now installed it. I'm going to open it. Perfect. I have a button here, which is exactly what we wanted. And if I click it, with a little bit of luck, it'll open up my blog. Perfect. It looks like it worked. So as you saw, that is a very easy way to launch URLs using the InAppBrowser plugin in your Ionic 2 Android and iOS application. So there wasn't a whole lot to it.